Team DRaS is an elite group of veterans, researchers, scholars, professionals, and young researchers to cultivate the culture of research and activities across the country. We are privileged with the presence of our dignified advisors. Hearty welcome to our senior most advisor, Vice Admiral MP Muralidharan, AVSM and BAR NM, Lieutenant General A.V. Shivane, PVSM, AVSM, VSM, Lieutenant General Mohan Bandari, Rear Admiral S. Madhusudanan, Rear Admiral Sudhir Pillai, Major General Jacob Taragan, Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar, Major General Vijay Pandey, Rear Admiral Amit Vikram, Major General A.K. Shukla. We also welcome our distinguished senior fellows and my fellow research associates who are a part of this discussion today. And of course, the strength of our discussion, our dear audience. And special welcome to all the flagged officers, both serving and retired, and serving officers, veterans, and the student community who are a part of this discussion today. Well, today's topic is, a bit crucial one, as it shall be unveiling some major facts pertaining India-China border skirmishes. So I now request our moderator for the day, Divya, to take this discussion forward. So Divya, it's all yours now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lakshmi, and good evening, everyone. As your moderator for the evening, I take this opportunity to give a formal introduction to our guest speaker of the day, Lieutenant General A.V. Shivane, PVSM, AVSM, VSM. General Shivane is a seasoned and distinguished scholar warrior. Over 39 years of his experience in the Indian Army included many important assignments within and outside India. To mention a few, he was in charge of the anti-terrorism operations in Jammu and Kashmir from 1997 to 1999. He has commanded the Elite Strike Corps at Mathura in 2014-15 and held the coveted appointment of Director General Mechanized Forces of the Indian Army. General Shivane has also represented India at the UN Peacekeeping Mission in Guatemala, and as a renowned national and international speaker and a well-published analyst on counter-terrorism, geostrategy, and geopolitics, today he is amongst us to share his wisdom on a very relevant subject, India-China skirmish, current options for India. The scuffle between Indian and Chinese soldiers on June 15 at Ladakh's Galwan Valley had triggered a series of unpleasant events which have affected the bilateral relation between the two neighbors. As we speak today, almost 3 months later, the situation continues to be tense and dynamic, and India is contemplating various permutations and combinations to deal with the crisis. Over the next 20-25 minutes, General Shivane will discuss his analysis and prognosis of the situation. May I request all the guests to remain muted throughout the conversation. For a smooth and timely conduct of the event, all guests are requested to render their questions in the form of text only by typing their question along with their name and identity in the chat box of the Google Meet app. You may text your questions during the proceedings. We expect active and enthusiastic participation of our audience, and we'll try our best to accommodate all the questions in the question and answer session. Once again, mics to kindly remain off to avoid any background interruption. Thank you. Over to General Shivane.
Good evening and Jai Hind. Thank you, Divya. Thank you, Team Defense Research and Studies, for this kind invite. I'm indeed honored to be in the presence of such an august gathering. We have General Mohan Bandari, we've got Vice Admiral Muralidharan, and many distinguished attendees this evening. Today is also Saragari Day. 21 Sikhs took over 10,000 Afghan tribal enemies. I think my salute and tribute to them, and a reminder of all the Indian soldier, its ferocity and its patriotic standing in ensuring the safety and security of the nation. Now, from the time I got this invite and it went up to today, a lot of water has flown down Shyok River, and there are many ripples which have taken place in Penang So Lake. And I'm told strong breeze is also blowing over the Chinese Moldo camp as such. To start with, let me give you how I look at China. I mean, to me, China is less of a name and more of an acronym. And I've coined this acronym. C stands for coercive diplomacy. I don't have to amplify these with the August Guardian. So C is for coercive diplomacy. H is for harmonious subversion that they carry out. I is for intolerance and intimidation that is associated with them. N is for Nazist ideology of Levinson, Middle Kingdom, Chinese dream. And A is for assertive and aggressive behavior. Xi Jinping rule and China rules the world. So that is how I describe China from my perspective. But China has a very complex strategic culture which actually defines the psyche. Uh, I think it perceives itself not only as a nation state, but a state of civilization. You have the Middle Kingdom mentality, you have the Chinese dream, their love for anniversary dates 2021, 2049. Uh, they even talk cosmology reasoning for them. The heaven is above, the earth is below, and in between heaven and earth is China. And then there is the narrative of century of humiliation, which brings in the insecurity in the psyche. And so this incremental expansion, revisionism by cohorts of diplomacy is an offshoot of this strategic culture, which is deeply ingrained as such. So my take on this culture, psyche, and strategy of the Chinese when it relates to how they play up in India is they will keep the LSC alive. It's in their interest because then they initiate standoffs, they show aggressiveness, then they pass on the blame, and then they retain the gains. That is the game that they used to play. Then there is a difference between what Chinaman says, what he knows, and what he does. So really, the dragon cannot be trusted. And my third aspect is China believes in mixed messaging, ambiguity of intent, so that complacency is set in. And look at the joint statement by the two external affairs minister, then an individual statement by the Chinese official, and then the Wolf warriors coming up with very aggressive statements. So coming to the present standoff as such, I think the Chinese intent is very clear. The strategic intent, I would say, it 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 aims to weaken, contain, and disrupt India's rise as a regional competitor. It's very conscious of that fact. So, yeah. So it's very conscious of this fact, and therefore it has chosen a time which it perceives as vulnerability because of the COVID and the economy. It's chosen a place, be it giving depth to its CPEC or concerns of 370, whatever it is. That's just excuse. It's chosen a place and chosen the force for an unambiguous strategic messaging. Also, it wants to dissuade the perceived anti-China nexus that it perceives between India and US, and to tell them to say that you must look at the cost benefit of that. Now, with that sort of intent of my understanding, now let us look at the turn of events because they're important to understand how we look at the options and the future scenarios. Now, when you look at the turn of events, I think the incursion and at Galwan and the ferocity and the fierce response that they got immediately thereafter was something that they really didn't expect. Yes, we were surprised, but I think our messaging taking place in the sea also. And the Air Force built up the Rafales, maybe 5 in numbers, but there was a military psychological factor which got built up as such. I think politically too, there were strong messages. A decisive political will of a firm action and the use of SSF. That was an indicator to say that the potential of the Tibet card and the possible review of one China policy. Therefore, along with this are other associated actions of economic decoupling, denying market access, etc., along with the global pressure points that we built up, whether it's Quad bonhomie or Europe shunning the Chinese external affairs ministers and our logistic tie-ups to Japan and coming up in Russia. I think this should have given diplomatically a sort of a leverage for the Indian side. Now, where are we at the moment? I think militarily, the military tensions on ground, where the soldiers are facing each other, are very high. They are the razor edge of escalation spiral. The man across is seeing his adversary with the weapons, and he knows that there's build-up in the rear, and he's there to protect his post. So it's pretty high. Military probing actions to gain tactical advantage are taking place. The new rules of engagements are there. So troops in contact and a spark can ignite a fire. The talks, whether it's military, diplomatic, my way of thinking have not made much progress, not real solution. The positive is, of course, that the military diplomatic channel is open. The talks are taking place. But nothing new, meaningful for troops on ground or actually de-escalating the situation has taken place, except sweet talk. There is no commitment or strategic guidance that has taken place. The line of actual control is becoming a line of physical control or a line of probing control. There is avoidance of reference to status quo ante, whether it is April or before that. And there is a little discussion on pullback methodologies. So when my analysis of the recent diplomatic talks is, while a joint statement is positive, but the mixed messaging is not a good sign. The outcome was a letdown. The ambiguities and routine statements, in fact, play upon the Chinese, and it's business as usual. Routine diplomatic tune and pullback and status quo ante were not there. And my observation also, when the RO meet took place, it displayed poor optics because there's no uniform senior fraternity on the Indian side where you saw the PLA cross with all of them. So it had to send two messages. One, the political, diplomatic, and military bonhomie, and then second, a strategic messaging that were absent. And look at what they have mentioned in their joint statement. Not allow differences to become disputes. Current situation at border is not in the interest of either side. True, but nothing new. It just is saying that both sides are looking at war avoidance. How to segment, how de-escalation, short term, long term, it stands by logic. Quickly disengage and maintain proper distance. I mean, how do you do that? Status quo ante, buffer zone. Buffer zone, something which I think is a dreadful thing for the Chinese concept as they talk about it. Do you see the advantage that we have gone and put them in some sort of a back foot? So, meanings of maintaining proper distance and ease tension. Well, they haven't translated into they're spoken well, but I'm afraid nothing really on ground is making much of a headway. Then you abide by all existing protocols. Uh, and lastly, the senior representative, WMCC, the working mechanism, and the CBMs. I think these are all fine, but it has finally given a message that uh, military talks, diplomatic talks, not make headway unless the political episcopal talks take a decision and decide. Therefore, my assessment, it has been a hollow, ambiguous routine, not addressing the friction points, no clear political and diplomatic direction to military, no assurance of peace to prevail. Business as usual on ground, and maybe just a delayed tactics to bring in complements in complacency and increase coercion in time to come. There is also indication of the political distrust, because of which no signs are taking, no talks are taking place, and so there's a need to be prepared for a long distance marathon. Now, what are the Indian options, strategic options in such a complex situation that is going on, ambiguities, lack of clarity, and troops facing each other? Well, I would say the first option of an all-out war, or even a localized war, I think both sides realize it is cost prohibitive. With both sides stemmed in, the notion of victory will not be achieved, the political objectives may not be achieved. And it is not in the interest of either countries, more so China who's taking a beating at the global front. So border resolution can only take place through a political solution, not through a military solution. And I think it's more detrimental to China's global ambition, especially at a time when the pressures and the outlook towards China, global outlook, says it all. And they don't want the same coalition that they deter, like the Quad, to become an open anti-China coalition. So, and they have not fought a war for the last 4 decades after Vietnam. And they also took a beating. There are 28,000 troops versus the Vietnamese 10,000. The Indian army is there. It's in Siachen. It's been blooded. It's more motivated. It's not a soft hands conscript army. So I think war and a limited war, uh, unlikely, not in the press, but the spiral could go up. My next look at it is a gray zone sort of a conflict. No war, no peace. Again, it's a detrimental to both sides, but more to China. And this would imply probing actions, seeking certain locations which give tactical dominance, an advantage to give further leverage as the negotiations progress, pressures to build up. But such things are also fraught with escalation, and not only in this sector, but to spread to the other sectors too, as such. At the same time, I think my sense of it is we should also up the ante at sea. But naval deployment at sea has natural advantages to us, and we have many partners. And uh, China has a problem to look at the Himalayas and look at the sea. Well, and it's more concerned, very frankly, on there, where the actual threat to it lies much more. Therefore, a solution through political initiative is what I feel is going to be likely, which is going to create a de-escalation, delineation, demarcation. But whatever solution comes, it must have a short-term de-escalation, but it must be caveated by the, a framework, a institutionalized time framework of delineation and demarcation of the boundary. Otherwise, the dragon will strike back again with greater ferocity. And certainly, sirs, no buffer zone because you don't want to move back in your own territory, deny petroleum, deny infrastructure development as such. Uh, Also, I think we should raise the non-military cost for China and below the conflict threshold. Increase global awareness of the high risk of doing business with the Chinese, because that is fraught with dominating them and putting a military angle to it, whether it's BRI, whether it is debt diplomacy. It's all quite visible, and the world is realizing. Then we should foster multilateral forums like Quad, logistic pacts. Uh, 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 it needn't be overtly Chinese, but I think we should draw economic and security strength from these things. A collective economic security, alternate markets, sharing of technology, and weaken the Chinese system coalition, the dependencies as such. And also, I think the approachment with Russia uh, to the proposal already existed to get them into the South China Sea. I think these will play out. Another aspect which I feel we should be doing is to exploit the Chinese multiple fault lines that actually exist both internally and the external front. Whether it's CPEC vulnerability, whether it is Tibet card, whether it is Hong Kong dissensions, whether it is the Taiwan, debt diplomacy, human rights, Xinjiang, socioeconomic disparities, and you name it, there are plenty of them. And finally, I think resolution will only be when the PM and the President will have. So the gray zone, no, to my sense of it, the gray zone, no war, no peace is likely to stay. The winters are going to be here. Before the winters, maybe till October, there's going to be uh, actions to seek tactical control. Not that winters, they will stop. 1962 happened in October, November too. But I think next few days or next few months is going to be a little thing. May not escalate, but like I said, the spark can ignite a fire. And therefore, we need to be prepared in all multi-domain warfare. They may just unleash certain cyber warfare actions too. And we must keep our diplomatic, tactical, and military talks on but finally the two sides have to meet at the apex level. I will end by saying that the Himalayan impasse is here to stay for some time. As the stakes are above territory, it is now a prestige of two countries, of true strong leadership, nationalism, and no one wants to let go without escape or an easy option. Yet I think optimism exists till the channels are open and escalation is controlled. There's going to be a testing time for patience, long drawn piecemeal disengagements till a face-saving formula or a common formula is formed. After all, Doklam took 73 days. Depsang Valley incursions in 2013 took 3 weeks. And this one is going to take, I think, the cake of it all and going to be one of the longest. Winters are setting in, and there will be testing time for both the intent and the resilience. My way of thinking, the extension is of this impasse is going to be more damaging to the Chinese perspective in the present circumstances as such. And they also have a issue of, if they're looking at the seas and the Himalayas, of the distance and the internal disturbances. So India will have to have the front line, very high level of readiness, both ground, air, and seas, and hope for the best, but be prepared for the worst. We'll have to seek counter alliance capabilities for certain technologies that may be weak for us. As far as diplomacy is concerned, I think prudence and patience and not haste in diplomacy and not letting go the advantage that we have is important. And finally, I think it'll be the apex political channels to be open. We must ensure that the cost benefit of not only incursions but continued standoff is made prohibitive for the Chinese by adopting a whole of the nation approach and not only a bilateral resolution, but raising it to the global pressures on the Chinese. They understand that language well because they only respect strength. Thank you, and Jen, it'll be a pleasure to listen to your comments and take on your questions.
Thank you, General Shivane, for such a focused, balanced, and comprehensive talk. You underlined some very interesting and important points with regards to the Chinese intentions, their psyche, tentative scenarios, and possible options available with India. May I now request our senior most advisor, Vice Admiral Muralidharan, to kindly share his views.
Thank you so much. And first, let me start by complimenting Commander Jayakishan and Team DRaS for putting together such a forum. And I think we have the first of the webinars. I'm sure we'll have many more such forums coming. And I must also compliment General Shivane for a very, very insightful analysis without rhetoric or dramatics. And after his having put so much together, there's not very much that I can add, but I would actually just make a few points. I would say that, national security strategy, whether it's for us or for any nation, is something that the nation needs to think out, and you must decouple it from domestic politics. It should not be something created to create optics or to get galia or for election purposes. It is the national interest that must be looked at. It may or may not be, get you my political mileage. Similarly, long-term plans and once a clear-cut political direction is given, armed forces will always deliver. And especially our Indian armed forces have proved time and again that despite all the deficiencies or shortcomings, they always think of very, very innovative ways, like we did in 71, totally foxed the enemy by various actions, whether it be from sea or what happened in Bangladesh or by the air. So that is one part. And while dealing with China, we are not dealing with a rational person. As General Shivane put it also, we need to think that they have a different way of thinking from what the rest of the world thinks. So we got to be careful. And I think our former Prime Minister, Mrs. Gandhi, in one of her speeches and writings, which I came across, she said very clearly, she said, there'll be probably 50 years down the line when we would be friendly with Pakistan, we would settle our issues. But she said, China is one country where we can never settle differences, nor can you ever trust them. Now, it's been proved time and again. After 62, despite all the peace, tranquility, we again come back to this. And as President Reagan said, that you must trust them, but you must verify. But Mrs. Gandhi was very clear-cut. You must verify, but don't go into the aspect of trusting. Just another point is, while we must utilize all our forces, whether it be at sea, now the Belt and Road Initiative, in my view, is one point because of the maritime front. They are still a little very, very skeptical, which is why he wants to develop a road initiative which is more confident with, and then also have key points in the thing. Now, he's already built up some assets in the African coast, looking into the Gulf area. So we need to look at that. And while we talk of cooperation with friends and, items like Quad or all other cooperation, we need to remember that all nations look at their own interests. You can already see that Australia has made certain statements. No, we are not going to deal in because there is a lot of economic ties. Even for us, if you sit back and deliberate, before you decide to rhetoric or break off economically, I think we need to think that what would be the impact on us, what is, and as General Shivane very rightly put, we need to do a cost-benefit analysis of any action that we do. And it's only with this, I think, we would be able to progress. Uh, there are no quick solutions. It's not a 2020 match. We just have to have patience and see who blinks first, and we should not be the person who should be blinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. I now request Lieutenant General Mohan Bhandari to also share his insights.
Thank you very much. The single big problem in normalizing our relations with China is total lack of trust. The sinocentrism or the ethnocentric behavioral pattern of the dragon is the root cause. And this gives the effect of domineering or dadagiri of China that has emerged worldwide with the total disregard to international law, logic, reasoning, rational thinking, and adhering to agreement, treaties, conventions, and accepted norms of a civilized world. Well, the first option is to expel the PLA directly, meaning thereby concentration of large amount of forces at various points PLA is occupying in the area and re-establish control. It is stretched almost about 210 kilometers from Depsang Plains to Pagong Chau. Second option is to indirectly expel Chinese forces by generating leverage at other points of the other domains and trade for withdrawal. Now, this may mean India joining with Quad and other areas east of Malacca Strait, but as has been said, it's a tall order because firstly, we got to look after our own supreme national interests, and it has its own ramifications. The third option is accept China's fait accompli and anesthetize the domestic fallout as we have been doing ever since 1950. Now, by exploiting this ambiguity of the word line of actual control, which is not demarcated on the ground. Having commanded a battalion at Chushul, I understand the problem of our troops and what we are having there. Well, some people call it now that it should not be called as the line of actual control, it should be called as the line of existing control, which should later on be changed into line of control as you're having it with J&K at the moment. Now, coming on to a little bit, about 30 seconds on the non-military option. Well, as far as the trade is concerned, the trade balance favors China in a very big way. And India is dependent upon China on basically like pharmaceuticals, microchips, and other things which we give it to them and we take all finished products from them. So China has been saying that, oh, okay, we have blocked about 224 mobile apps, but that's not good enough. You are the loser. So how I look at it is, now as the thing's going to come and it's going to now snow around in the month of October, and India will have to position a very huge force, not only in this Ladakh area, but all along 3,488 kilometer area of the line of actual control. And we have to do something like akin to the line of control. But then this has to be done at a great cost to the national exchequer. We are spending about 6 crores a day in Siachen. So we must understand, and all too in the midst of a pandemic. The diplomatic and the military talks that were held in Russia, Moscow, have yielded very little. And with that sinocentrism of China, which is with total disregard to international law, one cannot say what's going to happen. We've got to be prepared for any sort of eventuality, because now it's the question of the prestige of the nation. And we cannot remain anymore as a mute spectator and subservient to dragon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General. We now have about 20 minutes for audience interaction, and I've already received a couple of questions, some very interesting and pertinent ones. First, we have a question from Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar. and he wants to know there's a lot of trust deficit, as you've also underlined, and he doesn't expect much coming out of yesterday's meeting of the foreign minister. So, what is your understanding of India's alliances, and to what extent can we trust the US? Clubbing a question from another one from the audience who wants to know your views on India's alliances in the region.
Thank you, Rajan. A very interesting question. In this real world, there are no interests but self-interests. And the U.S. Bonami to India obviously has its own interest primary because India geographically, strategically is well placed as far as China is concerned. It's well placed in the as a regional power to influence global and regional dynamics, and it also has good connectivity and understanding to have influence in Central Asian regions also. So I see that we too must balance not US only as anti or alliance against China. Security is important, and they can keep them at bay at seas. And this arrangement, a strategic partnership arrangement, very good. But we need to build up our gaps as far as technology is concerned, as far as uh, delinking economy from China is concerned, and it has to be a global pressure. There is a huge deficit between China and India, and I don't see this happening because unless we look at a clear-cut demarcation and delineation of the problem area of the LSE, which is not going to, in my way of thinking, is the Chinese are not going to do it. So I think we need to look at opportunities, time frame, and look at our security and economic interests, national interests. And to that extent, I think our balancing and having strategic relationships with US is an important facet of our pursuing our national interests at for the time.
Thank you, General. I would like to read out a comment by Muralidharan Nair, and he says that if the ultimate political solution to the boundary issue is based on a give and take formula, how will the Indian army look at it? After all, it is often said that the armies are happy protecting well defined borders rather than hazy, disputed lines of actual control. Your comments on this?
Yeah, sir, you're absolutely right. This give and take is well said, but not only in the army, but today in an era where both have very high hyper nationalism, the polity what it is, no one wants to give up Aksai Chin or give up Arunachal or do a barter. It's not going to be accepted by the nation. It's not going to be accepted as such. So the stakes are very high. This give and take is not going to work out. What, to my sense of it, is that we have a very poor memory of history, so to say. And my sense of it is that we need to demarcate areas in such a way that there is a sanctity and understanding of what it is. It may amount certain give and take to a limited extent, not of Arunachal or Tibet or Aksai Chin as such, but the existing boundaries which are existing earlier, uh, uh, it may be earlier to April, As such, we need to very clearly, first, as a phase one, to say that this is a sort of a boundary of line of control, that you say, or a boundary, and the greater aspects of, Aksai Chin and Arunachal and the other Tibet issues, that can be discussed till cows come home. But we need to, for the on ground, remove this ambiguity which continues to be between finger 4, finger 8, PP so and so to PP so and so, and these are friction points which need to be resolved in ground.
Thank you, General. Now I'll take a set of questions. Somebody by the name MHNPP, he's not given his identity. He's asked, how is China viewing Hong Kong issue as India's strategic strength? And should we push for increased economic and trade restrictions to pressurize China? Then there's a question by Sumana. She's a JNU student and she wants to know, can you comment on Chinese tilt towards Iran and its increasing footprint? How is that going to have an effect?
Okay.
And there's a question from Krupa Varghese, wants to know Israel's position in the conflict. They have relations with both China and India. So how far would they render their support to us?
Oh, I couldn't get the last part of it. Can you please repeat?
Krupa Varghese wants to know what would be Israel's position since they have relations with India and China both. They have working relations with both the countries.
Who?
To what extent? Israel.
Israel. Okay.
To what extent can we bank on them?
Okay. See, the strategic triangle which exists, whether it is India, US, China, as such. But the first question was takes to Hong Kong. I think, be it Hong Kong, the repressions that have taken place, be it Taiwan, be it Xinjiang, be it Mongolia, be it Tibet, I think as a nation which a global voice, these must be raised. These must be raised because these are essentially either human rights violation or denying the people their basic livelihood and survival. So I think, like I said, we need to have these non-kinetic domains and fault lines being played out. As regards Iran, I think Iran, because of economic reasons, have driven by Chinese, US sanctions, has in a way accepted the Chinese and their infrastructure building as such. But I think when you look at the Iran, India, China triangle, Iran is very categorically said, because there were some rumors that the Chabad port is not going to be is going to be off, and that road is also going to be off. But I think India is very important to Iran, and if you see, even the American sanctions which have taken have been diluted for Chabad Fort and for the oil restrictions from Iran, because India is a critical aspect both for US and Iran to keep things alive. And Iran going to China is, like I said, is driven by economics, because it is sanctions are trying to make it dry. But yet there have been several comments. There have been several remarks within the Iranian state of the danger of over dependence on China. They have seen it in Sri Lanka. They're seeing it elsewhere. They're seeing it in Pakistan, that this over dependence of debt diplomacy has a dominance factor and a military factor attached to it. As far as Israel is concerned, I think mm, uh, with the Abraham Accord also between UAE and Israel taking place, of course, I think Iran would be quite unhappy with it because Iran-Israel dynamics continue. But I think Israel is a very important factor, and the strategic sort of relationship of Israel with India, both diplomatically, irrespective of our stance on Palestine issue, diplomatically, militarily, exchange-wise, technology transfers, and understanding of each other is very high. So I don't see a swing taking place of Israel away from the Indian strategic construct that has been built up over a period of time. I have confidence in this particular relationship as such.
Thank you, sir. Now we have a question from Group Captain Triloki, and also the same question by Mohsin. And they want to know, what do you think is the correlation between the upcoming US elections and the US support to the situation, their stance? And the same question has been asked by Bunty Rai. So US elections,
US
yes.
elections, yeah.
Right.
I think everyone is conjecturing on US elections, Trump, Biden, what will happen, the Chinese, the Iranians, the Russians, the world, the Australians, the Quad, even the Indians as such, whether Trump is good or Biden would be better. And there are many theories to it. But I think the key issue is there going to be a change between Trump's outlook to China and Biden's outlook to China? Is there going to be a policy shift? If you see the recent paper on China taken out by the US just a couple of months, 2-3 months back, very specifically for the first time, they have talked of China as a threat and its entire dimensions as such. I think Trump or Biden, whoever comes, China will require a national strategic policy to be contained and not go out of control as a belligerent threat to US and to the global community as such. And therefore, I don't see a major policy shift. There may be policy shifts in relation to dealing with US, in relation to dealing with Iran, in looking at the Quad dimension, whether to strengthen or keep it as it is. But China, the way they would view China as a threat to global security and a threat to US is going to be there. Unfortunately, geopolitics is a very dirty, funny sort of thing. Pakistan's number one threat is India. India's number one threat is China. China's number one threat is US. You know, this US is going to look at China very, very, very carefully, and I don't think there's going to be much of a, bonhomie or, lessening of pressures for time to come. Yes, next decade is going to be a very, very crucial decade of how US behaves and contains China.
Thank you, General. We have a question from Chandra Sen in Rajasthan. There are a lot of questions from the the gentleman, but I'll take this one. He's asking who will be our allies. Like you also mentioned that in international relations, only interests are permanent, no permanent enemies, no permanent friends. So in particular in South Asia, whom could we bank upon as our allies? And along with this, to what extent would Pakistan use or misuse this crisis with China?
Okay. Whom do you bank upon? You need to bank upon yourself. You need to make yourself strong. You can't bank upon anyone else. It's time we made our own security mechanism and, like we said, national security strategy and a self-reliant nation. At the interim time, we will have to have certain alliances, certain arrangement as such. But I think while we talk of looking east, looking west, extended neighborhood, we need to do a lot of focus on our immediate neighborhood. We are losing our own immediate neighborhoods as such. Look at Nepal. You know, it was a very, very close nation to us, and suddenly they seem to be claiming areas of at Chinese behest, and I'm sure of Pithoragarh district. The Chinese are now claiming areas in Bhutan, which is close to east of Taiwan. The Chinese have got have got Sri Lanka into a 99 years lease on Hambantota. They are now weighing and playing up Bangladesh as such. Over the Bangladesh present dispensation is still quite looking at India, but still the Chinese investment, the Sylhet airport is L&T lost the this thing and it went to the Chinese, and Chinese have built in a lot of put in a lot of money for the infrastructure. Similarly, Maldives as such. So we have to look at our immediate neighborhood. If you don't have your neighbors with you, then I'm afraid, China, leave aside Pakistan, which has a site. You don't really, they are rentier economy. They don't have to do much. And I think the Pakistan angle in this dimension is limited to myself. Neither would the Chinese like them to be activated, nor do they have the resilience today economically, politically. I think they are under a lot of pressure. The Fatah is going to blacklist them under threat November. Yes, they are drawing pleasure by saying that Chinese is trying to put the pressure on India, but they were rather surprised by Galwan and what happened in South of Pananso, which even some of the press commented of the Indian sort of resilience and response capability. Yes, they will use this opportunity to push in a few more militants through the grid into Kashmir to create that and draw mileage that now China's got involved post 317 to the Kashmir issue. But I don't think, I think uh, Pakistan is a country which is on a suicidal note by itself. Very frankly, you don't require to do very much to them. Your number one threat is China as such.
Thank you, General Shivane. And the last set of questions now. Chandrasen Rajasan, he comments that our foreign policy has largely been defensive and reactive. And Swaraj Karia, who's a student associated with DRaS, he says that is it a feasible option to change our policy from defensive to offensive? And have we moved away from border defense to border management?
I, I think our policy is well balanced as such. You know, when you look at China and you look at this thing, when you have politicization of the military and militarization of politics, then it's a dynamite. It's not a good thing. So our foreign policy is stood ground, but it has to be dynamic as it is evolving now. It must have a message of not being a passive nation who can continue to say that, we will respond by resilience and as such. If someone misbehaves, whether it is your Western neighbor or your number one threat, China, I think the message has been very, very clear. Behave or else. Uh, that is the message. And from a non-alignment, today you've gone not only to a multi-alignment, but the alignment which suits your national interests without overbearing on any one country. So you got to balance in this real world. You got to balance your all-time trusted friend Russia, who's even stood in this time now also, as far as the S-400 deal is concerned, giving preference to us versus China. You have to balance U.S. For the national interests that you have to both economically, technologically, and on security issues. And you have to have uh, 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 bilateral and multilateral arrangements uh, based on your strengthening your economic, your global image, and interconnectivity in the world. But the bottom line is you should be aim, at least it's high time, to be self-reliant, have strategic autonomy, and be able to take care at least of your security needs. Because you shouldn't be looking over your shoulders and found wanting when you look at your security issues as such.
Thank you, General Shivane. Ladies and gentlemen, we are running out of time and we have to conclude. I apologize if I have missed out on a few questions due to paucity of time. I thank everyone, all the dignitaries, all the guests here for making the session so engaging. And now to conclude the proceedings, I request Purnima to kindly deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Divya. Honored to have this opportunity to thank today's speaker, Lieutenant General A.B. Shivane, who had graciously agreed to share his thoughts and insights on the ongoing standoff between India and China. It was a pleasure listening to you, sir. I take immense pleasure in thanking the distinguished senior members, Vice Admiral M.P. Muralidharan, Lieutenant General Mohan Bandari, Rear Admiral Sailendran Madhusudanan, Major General Jacob Tarkan Chacko, Rear Admiral Sudhir Pillai, and Major General Rajan Kochar. I would also like to thank the senior fellows and researchers of DRaS and other valuable members of the audience for their participation and active involvement to make this a very enriching session. I thank Lakshmi for the refreshing welcome address and Divya Malhotra for moderating the program in a very seamless way. My special thanks to Commander Jaykrishnan Nair for encouraging and supporting Lakshmi, Divya and me and for his inputs for organizing this seminar. Last but not the least, I am thankful to Team DRaS for providing a platform to discuss and engage on a very relevant and important matter of Indian national security. We look forward to having all of your esteemed presence in our future discussions. With this, let's call it a day. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.